Ace Frehley's 1978 solo album is widely considered by fans to be the best of the 4 solo albums released by the KISS members that year. Each one of the original members of KISS, Peter Criss, Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, and Ace Frehley, released a solo album at the same time, and fans have always preferred Ace's album over the other 3. Additionally, Ace's album was the only one to have a top 10 hit with the song Back in the New York Groove, which was written by Russ Ballard. That is also the only cover song on the album. While Ace's album has always been preferred by fans, nobody's ever been able to put their finger on exactly what it is about the album that makes it so incredible. So in this video, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why it's so brilliant, and then I'm going to ask you for your opinion. But before that, we're going to listen to both Ace talk about the album and Eddie Kramer, who was the producer of the album, so that we can gain some insights. So first of all, let's listen to Ace talk about why he thinks the album is so good. And this answer that he gives here is typical of what he says when people ask him the question. So let's listen in here.
With your solo record, which is unbelievable, why does it sound so good? Still, it just really needs.
I have no idea. I don't know what I'm doing. Sometimes when I'm writing, I just get the feeling like it's being beamed into my head. Mm-hmm. Same thing with lyrics. Mm-hmm. I have no problem at all writing lyrics. Sometimes I'll write, 3 verses in a half an hour. Don't ask me how.
Okay, so although Ace pleads ignorance about his creative method, I think that statement in itself can give us a little bit of insight into why the album is so good, but I'll get back to that in a minute. Before I get to that point, I want you to listen to something that Eddie Kramer had to say about why the 1978 solo album is so good, but the sound quality on this clip isn't very good at all, so you're gonna have to listen closely to what he has to say.
I think Ace and I, we'd always sort of gotten on pretty well, so it seemed natural that I would do his record. And as it so happened, it turned out great, because we had the only hit single. And in spite of the fact that he could really, was not a great vocalist, but he had great attitude. Sometimes great attitude means more than being a great vocalist.
Alright, in case you had trouble hearing what he was saying there, he made 2 main points. The first is that he and Ace had always gotten along really well, and they had good chemistry. The second was that although Ace wasn't a great vocalist, he sang with a lot of passion and enthusiasm, and that in the long run, this can sometimes be much more important than being a good vocalist. And then he also pointed out that Ace's album was the only one that had a hit single, which is something I'd already mentioned. Now, I'm going to give you my 3 reasons why I feel that Ace's solo album is so good. And before I do that, let's just brush over some of the background on the album. It was recorded pretty quickly from June through July of 1978, and then it was released in September of 78. It was basically Ace playing every instrument on it except for drums, where he had Anton Fig, and bass, where he had Will Lee on 3 tracks. So there are many tracks where Ace plays most of the instrument, and 1 track, Ozone, where the only other musician on the entire song is Anton Fig. And Anton Fig and Will Lee, of course, are the rhythm section from David Letterman's old band back in the day. Alright, so the album has 9 songs on it. 1 is a cover song of New York Groove, 1 is an instrumental called Fractured Mirror, and it's just over 30 minutes long, 36 minutes long. Every song on it is a hard rock song. There aren't any slow ballads, there aren't any experimental jazzy type things. It's pretty much a straight ahead rock album. So let's get right in now to my 3 reasons why I think this album continues to be so important to KISS fans and regarded as being so brilliant. So the first one would be that the songs are all really good. And this comes from the fact that Ace had been saving up songs during his tenure with KISS and had done demos and had songs ready to go for a solo album which he saw coming. Now, in an interview that he gave in 2024 at Goldmine, Ace said that he had songs already prepared for a solo album when KISS decided to make the solo albums. So here's the quote from Ace. Quote, "There were a couple of songs that I didn't present the band with while working on Love Gun. I remember holding back a couple of songs and I didn't present them to the band. Every time we would do a KISS record, everyone would do demos and present songs so Paul, Gene, and Peter could hear them as well as the producer, and then we'd decide which were the 10 or 11 best songs for the record. I held back a couple of songs that I thought were really good, and I held them back for my solo record. I knew that was coming. end quote. So it's not just the fact that he had a couple of songs in the can, it's that he knew that a solo album was in the offing. He had an inkling in his mind that a solo album was going to happen, even before the band brought it up as a project. I think this gave him a step ahead of the rest of the band, and it had his excitement and his creative energies pointed in that direction before the word even came down that that was what was going to be done. All right, that's my first point. My second point has to do with where the album was recorded. Now, a lot of people might think that Ace recorded the album in his private studio, his home studio, the underground studio that he had built, but in fact he didn't. The album wasn't recorded in a traditional studio at all. It was recorded at the Colgate Mansion, and there's a reason for this. And again, I'm going to quote from the same article, and here's the quote. Rock and Roll Over was recorded at the Star Theater, which wasn't a recording studio. I remember we recorded on the stage. Our producer, Eddie Kramer, built a makeshift control room in one of the rooms there. That's what I loved about Eddie. He was willing to take chances. There was a cool vibe in that. I had seen Frank Sinatra there. It was a mob joint, and they ended up tearing it down. I remember going there with my father-in-law and my brother-in-law to see a couple of fights there. It was before the internet and pay-per-view, end quote. So the experience of recording Rock and Roll Over in an empty theater gave Ace the idea to record his solo album at the Mansion in Connecticut. So he had a bunch of different areas in this old mansion where he could set up his equipment and record to get different sounds. And here's another quote from him talking about how they captured different kinds of sonics inside the mansion. Quote, when you walked into the mansion, there's a huge foyer, and then you could go up to the second floor using either the left staircase or the right staircase. So what Eddie did, beside close miking the drums like you always do, he put microphones up on the second floor facing down to get the natural reverb. At that point in time, they hadn't invented really cool digital reverbs that we have today and all the toys you could get with Pro Tools, and we were going for natural echoes, natural reverb sounds, end quote. So you get a bunch of different cool organic echoes and reverb sounds, not only for the electric guitars, but also for the acoustic guitars, the drums, and perhaps even some of the vocals and background vocals, which gives the album a depth and a unique character that you're not going to hear on an album that was recorded in a traditional studio. So that would be my second point. Now, I do think this could be the most important point, which is the motivational factor. When the album were slated to be recorded, when Kiss decided that each member was going to do a solo album, they had a band business meeting before beginning work on them. And Ace recounts an incident where Gene and Paul said to him that he would probably need their help. So here's his quote. I remember Paul and Gene made a statement to me in front of everybody that was kind of a dig. They said, oh Ace, by the way, if you need any help on your record, don't hesitate to call us. In the back of my mind, I'm saying, I don't need their help, end quote. So when he went to make the album, not only had he seen it coming, chose a unique place to record it. It had some really good songs, but he had an axe to grind, both literally and metaphorically. He wanted to let the other members of Kiss, primarily Gene and Paul, see his cards, so to speak, and he did a great job of proving them wrong. He's also on record in other interviews saying that he never really found his creative footing until he left Kiss to do the solo album. And I think if you listen to the album, you can get a sense of that kind of excitement and freedom that he was experiencing at being out on his own and kind of unshackled. Now, I think that these three reasons that I've given are very important and significant, but I don't think they're exhaustive. There's probably plenty of other reasons, and that's where you come in. If you're a fan of this album or an Ace fan, let me know your opinion on why you think it's such a great album, and let me know also what you think of my take on it. This is what I think, but what really matters is what you think. So if you have an idea about this or any other topic connected to classic or contemporary music, please drop it in the section below, and remember to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot.
Music Guru here, asking you to help us on our march to 10,000 subscribers.